How reprogram your day. Instantly, before you touch your phone in the morning, before your feet even touch the floor, something unseen begins to shape your destiny. The moment your eyes open, your mind enters a fragile and powerful state, suspended between sleep and consciousness, between the dream and the day. In that quiet transition, your brain is rewriting its code. Yet, almost instantly, your hand reaches for a screen. You think it's harmless, just a quick check, just a notification. But what truly happens in that second is not a habit, it's a hijacking. When you touch your phone before touching your soul, you surrender authorship of your mind. Dopamine surges through your neural pathways, not because you've achieved something meaningful, but because your brain anticipates stimulation. It's a reward loop disguised as connection, a chemical illusion that replaces inner awareness with artificial urgency. Those few seconds of scrolling are enough to anchor your entire day to distraction, flooding your nervous system with microdoses of cortisol, conditioning your focus to crave noise instead of silence. The morning was never meant to begin with chaos. It was meant to begin with consciousness. Think about it. Before technology, humans woke up to rhythm, not reaction. They listened to breath, felt the texture of air, observed light, and understood that awareness itself was sacred. Now, we've outsourced that awareness to pixels. We wake up not to life, but to algorithms. And that silent theft of attention is the quietest form of self-betrayal. But what if you could reclaim those first 90 seconds? What if you could reprogram the exact moment your brain re-enters reality? Neuroscience shows that right after waking, your mind moves from theta to alpha waves, the same frequency monks enter during deep meditation. It's the moment your subconscious listens without resistance. Every thought, image, or sound in that window becomes a command for the rest of the day. That's why what you do before you touch your phone isn't just a habit. It's an act of self-creation. Imagine opening your eyes and pausing, feeling the weight of your body, breathing once with intention, choosing the first thought that enters your mind instead of letting the world choose it for you. In that pause lies your freedom. You can wire your brain for focus, gratitude, and clarity, or you can hand it over to the endless noise of the digital hive. The difference between those two realities is decided not by willpower, but by awareness. This is not a motivational message. It's a call to wake up, not just physically, but psychologically. The world you create each morning begins before you move, before you think, before you scroll. In that first sacred breath, your brain awaits its command. The question is, who will you let program it, your higher self or your phone? The invisible battle for your morning mind. The first battle of your day isn't fought in traffic or at work or even in your thoughts. It begins the moment you wake up, inside your brain. As you transition from sleep to consciousness, your mind moves through delicate neurological frequencies, from theta to alpha waves. This shift opens a rare window of neuroplasticity, where your brain is highly receptive, like wet clay waiting for form. What you do in that state doesn't just influence your mood, it programs your identity for the day. The problem is that most people lose this battle before they even know it's begun. When your eyes meet the glow of a screen, your nervous system doesn't recognize convenience. It recognizes threat. The sudden flood of light spikes cortisol, your primary stress hormone. Notifications trigger dopamine release, creating anticipation and craving. You're no longer setting your rhythm. You're syncing to the machines. Your phone becomes the metronome of your mind, setting the pace of distraction that will echo for hours. Andrew Huberman calls this the neurochemical cascade of attention hijacking. Once it starts, your prefrontal cortex, the seat of logic and long-term planning, gets temporarily overridden by the limbic system, which craves instant gratification. You begin the day reacting, not deciding. This is the silent programming, the external world writing your mental script before your consciousness takes the pen. But here's the truth that most never realize. Your environment programs you before your will does. The light, sounds, and actions you expose yourself to in the first minutes after waking condition your brain's electrical activity and neurochemical balance. If you wake to noise, chaos becomes familiar. If you wake to silence and stillness, clarity becomes your baseline. The first few minutes of consciousness are the blueprint of your mental architecture. This is why the most powerful people on earth protect their mornings as sacred ground. Not because of discipline alone, but because they understand this invisible war. The war for control over the mind before it's even fully awake. They choose presence over input, intention over impulse. You can too. Every morning, your brain asks one unspoken question. Who is in command, the outside world or you? The dopamine hijack. How technology colonizes your focus. The moment you touch your phone, your brain doesn't simply wake up. It lights up like a machine set on overdrive. That small rectangle in your hand has been engineered by the brightest minds in behavioral neuroscience to exploit one single molecule, dopamine. But dopamine isn't the chemical of pleasure as many think. It's the chemical of pursuit. It's the spark that drives you to chase what you believe will bring reward. And when your brain encounters the flood of unpredictability inside your screen, messages, likes, updates, it's trapped in a cycle of endless anticipation. Andrew Huberman describes this as dopamine delusion. Every time you scroll or refresh, your brain is not enjoying. It's expecting. That constant "what's next" sensation rewires your reward system. The neural pathways that should be activated by effort, creativity, or learning now become conditioned to seek stimulation. Over time, your ability to feel satisfaction without novelty begins to decay. You're not distracted because you lack discipline. You're distracted because your biology has been colonized. Every ping, every swipe, every notification is a microdose of dopamine paired with microsurges of cortisol, the perfect neurochemical storm for dependency. The brain starts to crave this pattern: quick highs, no depth. It's the same mechanism seen in addiction, but wrapped in convenience and productivity. The cost: your focus becomes fragmented, your patience weakens, and your mind forgets the rhythm of stillness. You wake up not as an autonomous being, but as a subject of digital conditioning. Aristotle believed the highest form of freedom was mastery over one's impulses. In our time, this freedom is neurological. The discipline to resist that first swipe is not moral strength, it's neurochemical sovereignty. You are choosing to protect your brain's natural reward cycle from artificial hijack. Each morning you delay the phone, you retrain dopamine to serve you, not enslave you. Because here's the truth. Your phone isn't the problem. It's the relationship your brain has formed with the chase. The modern battle for focus isn't about removing technology. It's about reclaiming control over the molecule that drives your motivation, your joy, and your sense of meaning. The mirror neuron trap. Every morning, before your own identity fully awakens, your brain begins to mirror the world it encounters. Deep inside your cortex lies a system of mirror neurons, cells that fire both when you act and when you observe someone else acting. They are the biological foundation of empathy, learning, and emotional resonance. But when the first thing you expose them to is a digital flood of faces, opinions, and emotions, these neurons start copying chaos instead of consciousness. You scroll through anger, vanity, fear, and comparison, and your brain can't tell the difference between witnessing and participating. It absorbs those emotional frequencies as if they were your own. Without realizing it, you start the day with borrowed emotions, anxiety that isn't yours, restlessness that doesn't belong to you. The moods of thousands of strangers becoming the baseline of your inner world. Joe Dispenza often explains that energy follows attention, and whatever you give attention to, you become. When your attention is hijacked by others before you've anchored yourself, your sense of self begins to fragment. You lose the thread of your own consciousness. The philosopher Michel de Montaigne once said, "The greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself." In this new digital age, that wisdom has never been more literal. To belong to yourself you must first protect your neurons from imitation. Neuroscience now confirms that mirror neurons are not passive observers. They are teachers. They sculpt the emotional tone of your brain. If your first exposure is reactive and scattered, your neurons teach your mind to follow the same pattern. If your first exposure is silence, breath, or intentional reflection, they reinforce calm, empathy, and emotional stability. The architecture of your morning emotions is built by the faces you see, the words you read, and the tone you allow in. Ask yourself, whose emotions are you carrying before breakfast? Are they even yours? The power to reclaim your mental clarity lies not in isolation but in intention, in choosing what you let your brain mirror before your consciousness takes command. Because the first reflection you see each day shouldn't come from a screen, it should come from within, the forgotten mindset of stillness. There was a time when the first sound a human heard in the morning was the pulse of nature, the rhythm of breath, the whisper of light, the quiet reminder that existence itself is enough. Today, that silence has been replaced by alerts, vibrations, and screens demanding attention before your soul even remembers it exists. Yet stillness is not the absence of action. It is the foundation of all conscious movement. It is where clarity begins and confusion ends. Marcus Aurelius wrote that, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." But thought itself needs space to form. When you wake and rush into stimulation, you deny your mind the room it needs to organize itself. Neuroscience calls this cognitive priming, the process by which your brain establishes its operational tone for the day. If you begin in noise, your mind adapts to chaos. If you begin in silence, your brain activates the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for focus, planning, and emotional regulation. Stillness is not laziness or passivity. It's the deliberate act of placing your consciousness before your circumstances. René Descartes believed that to find truth, one must first clear the fog of assumptions and external noise. The same principle applies to your mornings. Before the world speaks, you must think. Or rather, you must remember how to think. The moment you create inner stillness, your mind stops reacting and starts directing. You no longer move through the day as an echo of yesterday's noise, but as the author of your own attention. Andrew Huberman's research supports this ancient wisdom through modern science. A few minutes of intentional stillness can reset your nervous system, balance your neurochemistry, and shift your brain into a state of calm alertness. This isn't spiritual idealism, it's biology. Your neurons crave moments of low stimulation to consolidate memory, restore dopamine sensitivity, and prepare for focus. In stillness, you give your mind the conditions it needs to perform at its peak. Stillness is not about doing nothing. It's about remembering that you are not the noise you consume. It's the sacred pause where your thoughts align with your purpose and your attention returns to its rightful owner, you. When you start your day from stillness, you don't have to chase peace. You become the source of it. Neurochemical reset, the science of conscious awakening. The human body is a symphony of chemicals, each molecule playing its part in shaping your perception of reality. Every morning, this symphony begins again. Before your thoughts take form, before your emotions surface, your neurochemistry decides the tone of your consciousness. Most people start their day with their biology in disarray. Cortisol surging, dopamine scattered, serotonin low. But what if, in just a few minutes, you could reset that entire system and begin the day not in reaction, but in command? Cortisol, often labeled the stress hormone, naturally spikes in the morning to wake you up. That's not a problem, it's a design. The issue is what you feed that state with. If your first act is to scroll, argue, or compare, you multiply cortisol's signal, priming your body for anxiety. Yet if your first act is slow, grounded breathing, especially through the nose, you send a message to your brainstem that you are safe. That single signal lowers heart rate, stabilizes cortisol release, and activates the prefrontal cortex. Calmness is not a personality trait, It's a physiological response you can trigger at will. Next comes dopamine, your system's motivational currency. It determines what feels worth doing. When it's spent on quick digital bursts, you drain your motivation before the day even begins. But when you channel it through natural stimuli, sunlight, movement, hydration, you restore it. Andrew Huberman explains that even 2 minutes of morning sunlight directly to the eyes, without screens, resets your circadian rhythm, aligning dopamine, cortisol, and serotonin. It's not mystical, it's measurable. Then there's serotonin, the molecule of balance and contentment. Serotonin rises with exposure to light and gratitude-based reflection. A single mindful breath in the morning can trigger the vagus nerve, increasing serotonin flow and stabilizing mood. Joe Dispenza would call this teaching your body to feel before your mind thinks. It's the act of setting emotional tone before external events dictate it. By combining these small acts, breath, light, and intentional awareness, you perform a neurochemical reset. You stop being a passenger of hormones and become the conductor of your inner orchestra. Neuroscience and philosophy converge here. Awareness gives you authorship. When you own your biology, you reclaim your destiny. The first thought principle. The most underestimated force in your entire day is the first thought that crosses your mind. It may seem insignificant, but that single thread becomes the fabric of your mental reality. Neuroscientists call this phenomenon mental initialization. The brain's tendency to follow the neural pattern it activates, first upon waking. Whatever you think in that fragile moment doesn't just color your mood, it sets a trajectory for perception, emotion, and decision-making. Your mind, still suspended between the subconscious and the conscious, accepts that thought as truth. When your first thought is reactive, worry, distraction, or self-criticism, you unconsciously instruct your brain to look for evidence that confirms it throughout the day. This is how your mind becomes trapped in self-fulfilling cycles. But if your first thought is intentional, rooted in clarity, gratitude, or purpose, you create a different command sequence. The neural pathways that process emotion and logic begin to align, allowing focus and resilience to emerge naturally. It's not positive thinking, it's neurological conditioning. René Descartes believed that to know oneself is to begin from doubt, then rebuild truth through reason. That's the essence of this principle. You choose the foundation on which your reasoning rests. Each morning, before thought becomes chaos, you have a brief window to choose the lens through which you'll interpret reality. It's not about control, it's about authorship. You are not your first thought, but you are responsible for what follows it. To harness this, you must pre-script your first mental command the night before. Write a single line, a phrase that encapsulates how you want to be, not just what you want to do. It could be as simple as, "Today, I act from clarity." When your mind awakens, return to that phrase before the world floods in. That intentional act primes the hippocampus and amygdala, rewiring emotional memory to serve focus rather than fear. The first thought is the spark that lights the structure of your consciousness. If you let randomness ignite it, you burn energy. If you light it with awareness, you illuminate direction. The mind doesn't wait for your permission to run, but it will follow the first instruction it receives. Make it count, the morning as a mirror of the subconscious. Every morning, before your conscious mind fully awakens, the subconscious stands at the doorway between the dream world and waking life, receptive, impressionable, waiting for direction. In that brief interval, your body and mind are not yet separate. They are one unified field of memory and emotion. What you expose yourself to in that state is not just observed, it's absorbed. It becomes the emotional signature of your day. Joe Dispenza calls this the neurological imprint of consciousness. The body learns to feel before the mind begins to think. When your first moments are spent scrolling, reacting, or comparing, you unconsciously upload those frequencies into your nervous system. The subconscious translates them as instruction. Anxiety becomes the baseline. Distraction becomes the rhythm. You're not just reading information, you're rehearsing identity. Over time, you stop being a participant in life and become a recording of external stimuli, replaying emotions that aren't even yours. But the reverse is also true. When you begin the day in awareness, a deep breath, a word of gratitude, a few seconds of silence, your subconscious receives a different message: safety, presence, sovereignty. That emotional tone signals the autonomic nervous system to regulate itself, stabilizing heart rate, hormonal flow, and cognitive clarity. The result is not mystical, it's measurable. The parasympathetic system activates, and your body learns to rest in alertness, a state neuroscientists call calm readiness. The Stoics understood this intuitively. Marcus Aurelius wrote his Meditations. Each morning not as ritual, but as calibration. He wasn't writing to the world, he was writing to his subconscious, commanding it to align with reason and virtue before chaos arrived. Modern neuroscience now validates this ancient discipline. Repetition of intentional thoughts at the border of sleep strengthens neural networks tied to focus and emotional control. Your mornings are a mirror. They reflect not who you are, but who you're becoming. If you want to change your life, you don't start with massive resolutions. You start by changing what your subconscious sees when you wake. Because the first few minutes of the day are not preparation for consciousness. They are consciousness in its purest form. Protect them, and you'll reshape not just your mornings, but your mind itself. The law of inner gravity. Every mind operates under an invisible force, a psychological gravity that pulls the day toward the emotional state in which it began. The tone of your morning becomes the orbit of your consciousness. If you start with noise, you attract confusion. If you start with calm, you attract clarity. This is not metaphorical, it's neurological. The brain's attentional networks, once activated, seek consistency. They filter reality to match the emotional frequency you initiated at dawn. You quite literally pull experiences, reactions, and interpretations into alignment with your first inner state. Think of your attention as mass. Wherever it concentrates, energy gathers. When your mind awakens in anxiety or distraction, that mental mass attracts more of the same, a gravitational field of chaos. But when you wake in awareness, when you breathe before you react, you increase your mental density in the present moment. That grounded state exerts a different pull, one of focus, stability, and order. It's the same principle that governs the universe. Everything follows the strongest center of gravity. In the mind, that center is your consciousness. Andrew Huberman often emphasizes that attention is the currency of the brain. It's what determines what your neurons strengthen or discard. The more attention you give to something, the more mass it gains in your neural circuitry. This is why mornings are sacred. The first focus of your attention sets the template for neural prioritization. The brain doesn't judge, it simply obeys. What you focus on first becomes what you perceive most. Marcus Aurelius understood this law centuries before neuroscience gave it language. Your mind will be of the same nature as the things you habitually dwell upon, he wrote. What he called nature, we now call neuroplasticity. The patterns you feed with thought grow stronger. The ones you ignore decay. So when you begin your day centered in gratitude, purpose, or stillness, you're not performing a ritual. You're defining the gravitational field of your mind. Every morning, ask yourself, what will I allow to orbit around my consciousness today? Because the law of inner gravity is constant, something will always pull your attention. The only question is whether it will be the weight of the world or the strength of your awareness. The ritual of reconnection. The most transformative part of your morning isn't what you do. It's how you reconnect to yourself before you reconnect to the world. The first few minutes after waking are a threshold between unconsciousness and awareness, a sacred transition where you can either reclaim your mind or lose it to external control. The purpose of a morning ritual isn't perfection or productivity, it's reconnection. It's the deliberate act of reminding your brain that you are the source of its rhythm, not your notifications. Science confirms what ancient wisdom already knew. The body is the doorway to the mind. When you breathe deeply through the nose, your diaphragm stimulates the vagus nerve, signaling safety and lowering cortisol. In that single minute, your brain rebalances dopamine and serotonin, the same neurochemicals that determine focus and contentment. Andrew Huberman calls this neurochemical alignment, the state where energy and calm coexist. It's the physiological foundation for presence. After breath comes light, real light, not from a screen. 90 seconds of sunlight, eyes open, no filters, is enough to activate melanopsin cells in your retina, which send direct signals to your brain's circadian clock. This resets your biological rhythm, telling your system that the day has begun. Dopamine rises naturally, cortisol stabilizes, and your alertness becomes organic instead of artificial. When you start with sunlight instead of pixels, you awaken to the world, not to its noise, but to its order. Then, write one sentence, not a to-do list, not a plan, a single line of intention. Today, I will respond, not react. Today, I will act from peace. The act of writing engages the prefrontal cortex, translating emotion into structure. It gives your thoughts form, your focus direction, and your awareness a place to rest. This simple ritual, breath, light, and intention, takes less than 3 minutes, yet it reorganizes the chemistry of your consciousness. In those minutes, you've done more than prepare for the day. You've reclaimed authorship over it. You've proven to your nervous system that calm can lead, that clarity can come before action, and that peace isn't something to find later. It's something to choose first. Because when you begin your morning by reconnecting with yourself, the world no longer dictates your energy. It follows it. The paradox of stimulation. Modern life has taught us to confuse stimulation with vitality. We've mistaken noise for meaning, activity for purpose, and constant connection for genuine awareness. The irony is that the more we stimulate the brain, the more numb it becomes. The nervous system, flooded with novelty, stops distinguishing between what is essential and what is empty. The result is a quiet exhaustion that feels like living, but isn't. It's motion without depth, dopamine without fulfillment. Cognitive behavioral therapy explains this through avoidance conditioning. The brain seeks stimulation not for pleasure, but to escape silence. Silence exposes thought, and thought exposes truth, the one thing most people fear facing before breakfast. That's why the phone feels irresistible in the morning. It offers immediate escape from the uncertainty of being alone with one's mind. But that escape is costly. Each time you flee to stimulation, you teach your brain that calm is dangerous, that quiet must be avoided. You condition yourself to equate presence with discomfort. Andrew Huberman's work shows that overstimulation creates a dopamine crash cycle, spikes of excitement followed by troughs of fatigue and restlessness. The brain's reward circuits, overused, begin to dull. What once inspired you now barely moves you. The simplest proof is this: most people can no longer sit in silence for even 2 minutes without reaching for a screen. That is not freedom. It's dependency disguised as connection. True vitality comes not from seeking more input, but from mastering output, controlling where your attention flows and how it's spent. The Stoics called this self-command. Marcus Aurelius warned that he who lives in harmony with himself lives in harmony with the universe. Modern neuroscience agrees. When you tolerate understimulation, the prefrontal cortex regains control, restoring emotional balance and deep focus. This is how presence is trained, not by adding, but by subtracting. The paradox of stimulation is this: the less you consume, the more alive you feel. The more silence you invite, the more your inner world expands. When you begin your morning by resisting the impulse for instant input, you don't lose connection. You rediscover it. You stop reacting to life and start experiencing it. And that, in truth, is the beginning of real energy. the kind that doesn't burn out by noon. The Stoic reset. Owning the present moment. The modern mind wakes up enslaved not by chains, but by noise, an invisible captivity woven from alerts, comparisons, and constant urgency. Yet the Stoics knew something our age has forgotten. No one can disturb a mind that governs itself. They trained for this long before dopamine, algorithms, or screens existed. For them, freedom wasn't about the absence of obstacles but the presence of command, the ability to decide where your attention goes and what it means. That is the essence of the Stoic reset, to reclaim your power over the present moment before the world tells you what to think. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Each morning, when you touch your phone before touching your consciousness, you step into a theater of imagined suffering, opinions, crises, and judgments that aren't even yours. You begin reacting to illusions, not living through reality. But if you pause, breathe, and let your awareness settle, you interrupt that illusion. You remind your brain that the present moment is the only place where life actually happens. This isn't philosophy, it's neuroscience. When you anchor your focus in the now, you deactivate the brain's default mode network, responsible for worry and rumination, and activate the prefrontal cortex, the seat of clarity and control. Marcus Aurelius practiced this every dawn. Before facing soldiers, senators, or storms, he wrote his thoughts, not to organize his tasks, but to organize his mind. He saw mornings as the frontier of reason, where one must reclaim sovereignty before chaos arrived. That's the power you have each day. When you choose to delay the world's noise, even for a few minutes, you aren't merely avoiding distraction, you're declaring authority over your consciousness. Andrew Huberman describes this as neurocognitive ownership, the process of deliberately training attention so that emotion follows intention, not the other way around. Each time you resist the impulse to react, you strengthen that neural circuit. Each morning you begin in awareness, you rebuild the architecture of freedom. The Stoics called it discipline. Science calls it plasticity. Not touching your phone is not an act of restriction, it's rebellion. It's the quiet refusal to let your attention be auctioned to the highest bidder. In that silence, you rediscover the simplest form of power, to decide what your mind will serve. And once you own that, the world loses its grip. The mental architecture of a reprogrammed day. When you master the first minutes of your morning, you're not just creating a routine, you're building architecture inside your brain. Every conscious act, every breath before reaction, every moment of silence before stimulation reshapes the structure of your neural pathways. Neuroscientists call this myelination, the process through which repeated thoughts and behaviors insulate neurons, making mental habits effortless. What you do intentionally today becomes automatic tomorrow. Your mornings, repeated with awareness, sculpt the mental architecture that determines your clarity, discipline, and emotional stability. Andrew Huberman's research shows that consistent morning behaviors, light exposure, focused breathing, delayed screen interaction, strengthen the prefrontal cortex's regulation over the limbic system. In practical terms, that means you stop being ruled by impulses and start being guided by logic and purpose. Over time, you rewire your brain to favor focus over distraction, patience over reactivity, peace over stimulation. You're not fighting your mind's chaos anymore, you're redesigning it. Philosophically, this is the bridge between Descartes and modern neuroscience. Descartes taught that clarity begins with doubt, that to rebuild truth one must first dismantle illusion. The act of reprogramming your morning is that same act of mental reconstruction, questioning what you've allowed to dictate your attention, then choosing to rebuild it from consciousness rather than habit. The clarity that follows isn't abstract, it's experiential. It's the quiet confidence that arises when your thoughts finally align with your biology. This new architecture changes how your day unfolds. You no longer chase energy, you generate it. You no longer react to the external. You move from internal rhythm. Your mind stops leaking attention and starts directing it. You begin to notice that productivity becomes natural, emotional control effortless, and creativity spontaneous. This is the state of coherence, where body, brain, and awareness function as one. The transformation is subtle but irreversible. Each morning you reclaim attention, your brain records the victory. Each moment of awareness adds another layer to the neural cathedral you're building. And eventually, the act of waking itself becomes sacred, not because of what you do, but because of who you've become in doing it. The sacred second before the world arrives. There is a single, silent second that separates who you were from who you are becoming. It happens every morning, just before the noise, before the scrolling, before the notifications awaken the collective chaos of the world. That second, unnoticed by most, is the doorway to consciousness itself. In that fraction of time, your mind stands unclaimed, pure and waiting. It's the only moment of the day when you are truly free, when the world hasn't yet told you what to think, who to be, or how to feel. That is the sacred second, the moment where the architecture of your entire reality begins. When you choose awareness over reaction in that instant, something extraordinary happens. The mind stabilizes, the nervous system aligns, and the body remembers what peace feels like. This is not about routine anymore, it's about identity. You stop living as an echo of yesterday and begin living as an author of now. Descartes would call this the moment of clarity after doubt, when the self recognizes itself as the source of truth. Andrew Huberman would describe it as neurochemical sovereignty, when biology finally serves consciousness, not the other way around. And the Stoics would name it what it has always been: freedom. Each morning, you are presented with two worlds, one that demands your attention and one that waits for your awareness. One begins with noise, the other begins with breath. One drains your energy through endless reaction, the other amplifies it through calm creation. The choice may seem small, to reach or to refrain, but that choice defines the trajectory of your day and, over time, the direction of your life. The second you reclaim is not measured in time, it's measured in power. Because when you control the first second, you control the script. The mind that starts in silence ends in clarity. The body that begins in peace walks in strength. The soul that chooses awareness before input becomes unshakable. This is where transformation begins, not in some distant goal, but in the sacred second before the world arrives. Guard it, honor it, live it. For in that second, you hold the key to your own reprogramming, the power to create a life that begins from the inside out, every single morning.